Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome or welcome back as always. If you're tuning into this video, then hopefully you are looking to learn or get some more insight into configuration groups within Cisco's Catalyst SD-WAN manager. So without any further ado, let me share my screen and let's go through a couple homework items here. So if you've been following the series in order, that's fantastic. So this video is part of a larger series, and I would encourage you to check out the rest of the episodes or videos. But if you're not following in order, let me just kind of give a quick overall. So we're going to be looking at configuration groups. We're going to be focused solely on this San Jose, California Cisco Edge router that is on the bottom left that I have just highlighted. It has a very basic config on it right now, which I will show in a minute or two. It's just got enough configuration to essentially talk out of its Gig 2 interface to reach the various SD-WAN controllers. I did make this MPLS, this is an actual router now, so it's a routed WAN. So the idea is that we will play the role of the service provider, and this router actually has an autonomous system number, and all four interfaces are configured. But again, we're only really concerned with San Jose at this point for this video. The Biz Internet is just a flat broadcast domain, VLAN, subnet, unmanaged switch, essentially, which all the routers share the same next hop. I just did it that way to keep it very simple. So that is the overall topology. Let's look at the configs of the San Jose router. So let me get logged in here. So if I show IP interface brief, we can see that all it has is the IP address on the Gig 2, like I made mention of. It's got a route to point to the next hop, which is its default gateway, and it should be able to reach one of all the controllers, but let's just ping one of them. This is the manager, the 51 address. So we have basic reachability. If I do a show run section BGP, you can see there's nothing there. If I do a show VRF, you can see there's no individual VRFs necessarily configured at the moment. If we look at the MPLS router, if I show IP interface brief, I can see that it's got the four interfaces facing all the branch sites and or the data centers. And then there is the BGP config on this, because again, we're playing the role of the service provider. For those of you who don't have your autonomous systems numbers memorized, this is Windstream. And again, we're just doing a simple BGP peering between the WAN and the satellite locations. So that's all there is to the topology. Let's head over to SD-WAN Manager now. And you can see if I go to monitor devices, let's just sort by reachability. You can see San Jose right here. It's got its reachability, it's got its control and BFD and T-locks. It's already on site 3, but if we go to configuration WAN edges, we should see that it is not managed. So essentially, there's no templates or anything attached to this device at this time. Now, again, if you've been watching in order, what I've been demonstrating so far has always centered around the idea or concept of templates. So configuration, classic, and then templates. This is how we've been doing it so far. You can see there's a branch single router device template, which has a bunch of feature templates attached to it, but you can see there's no devices attached at this point in time. So we're going to go a different route. We're going to do the configuration groups. So if we go to configuration, and then if we look here, we have an option for configuration groups. And you can see there are none defined. There's no profiles. They're all zeros, except for this default policy that comes out of the box. So we're going to change this. We're going to create a configuration group and see what the differences look like between the templates and just kind of work through the workflow. Now, if I come back to the main tab for configuration groups and I click create configuration group, this is one way to do it. Okay, this is a way where you give it a name, And then it would be our responsibility as engineers to come into each tab and create the various profiles that are needed to essentially attach to that or put into that configuration group. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, that doesn't really sound any different than the templates. And quite frankly, it's kind of not. But there's a even better way to do this. So if we go to workflows, so when I go to workflows, you can see there's a popular workflows section, and you can see there's a create configuration group workflow. So let's go ahead and click that. And we can see it brings up a wizard or a workflow, obviously. And it basically says, hey, the goal is to provide a straightforward method to configure devices. Well, that sounds fantastic. Let's go ahead and do it. So we'll give it a name. We'll say, I'm just going to say single router branch. Okay, doesn't really matter. For this case, it's just a lab. So I hit next, and it takes me to essentially the next step within the workflow. And you can see that it actually gives us this, pretty little topology, right? Right now, this is what it's currently set for. So we're going to walk through these different settings here, and we'll see that as we change the parameters, it will update the topology automatically. Now, if we want to hide the topology because we think it's getting in our way, we can simply click hide. Or if you want to kind of watch it as we go through, you can leave it obviously up to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it visible for the time being. And let's go ahead and start selecting our choices here. So for site type, obviously we're focused on San Jose, which we know is a single router, so this does not change. For site settings, this is where you start to get into kind of the same idea or the same concepts around the templates, where it gives you the ability to globally set the variables or make them device specific. And you can see as we go through this, it's pretty dumbed down to basically you can almost just click next, next, next through this thing. So for local device access, you can see it's asking for device specific. I'm going to make this global, and I'm just going to hard code my password. Okay, perfect. Banner, I'm not going to worry about the banner because again, this is just a lab. Now for the WAN interfaces, out of the box, it's presenting us with potential for 3, as we can see in the topology. We've got MPLS, public internet, and LTE. But if we go back to our topology, the idea we're trying to, or the design we're trying to follow is biz internet and MPLS. So I'm going to just go ahead and hit the trash can for LTE because we don't have an LTE connection. Now we do have MPLS. We do want to make it a static IP address, and we're going to obviously leave the color defined as MPLS. If we hit show advanced, we can see these are going to be the variables that we're presented with when we deploy this. So we're going to have to input the interface, the IP address, and the subnet mask. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. So I'll unclick show advanced. Okay, there we go. Now for this transport, I actually want to make this biz internet. So I'm going to change it to biz internet on the dropdown. It automatically changes the name for me. Again, this is global, the color. And for show advanced, I just want to take a peek to see what it's going to prompt me for. All right, it's going to ask me for the interface. It seems like this page is acting up. Let me collapse these and just, let's hide the topology for a second. Let's go back to WAN interfaces. Okay, static. That's why it was set to DCP. So static, biz internet, and under advanced, it's going to ask us the same exact variables that the MPLS wants, which is what interface are you attaching this IP and this mask to. So that's perfect. Moving down, let's look at WAN routing. So we can, if we hit add routing or hover over add routing, we can do static, BGP, or OSPF. Now, we're actually going to do static and BGP. So In previous videos, I haven't incorporated BGP. BGP is kind of new to the topology as of this video. So I think it's a worthwhile thing to demonstrate. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say static, and we're going to make it a next hop, and we're going to define the next hop. We're going to essentially put this in there when we're prompted, right? So again, it's a device specific variable. And when we're presented with this default route, we can go ahead and enter the 172 address that we had spoke about in the beginning of the video. So that's fine. For show advanced, you can see it's just going to do the quad 0 for the default static route. That's perfect. Now I do want to add BGP. So let's go ahead and hover over add routing. Let's add BGP. And if we scroll down, this is the essentially variables that we're going to be presented to on deployment to fill out. So this is going to be our BGP autonomous system number, so the local autonomous system number to the branch site. If we hit show advanced, I'm going to leave it at one neighbor because that's what the topology calls for. I'll leave it at one prefix, okay? That's fine. You can add up, you can add additional prefixes. I'm just going to throw in one. Now for the network address and the subnet mask, that's going to be for the one prefix I want to advertise. And I'm just going to go ahead and advertise the site IP, which is, you'll see when we deploy, I've just made it 10301, the very first IP address. So that's the only /32 I'm going to advertise. In a production environment, obviously, you'd probably want to advertise some more depending on the needs of your network. Now for a neighbor, this is where we're actually going to tell the router, hey, which neighbor am I peering with? Okay, what's his remote autonomous system number? So all the configuration bits and pieces we need to successfully turn on BGP. And again, you can change all these variable names. I'm just leaving them to show how simple this can be, right? Now for LAN and service VPN, this is where we're actually going to define which segments we want to essentially have our macro segmentation spread across the WAN with, right? So in our topology, if we go back, we're looking at VLAN 10 and 20. So they're the only two segments that we're looking to extend across the WAN environment. You can have as many as you need. I'm just showing it as an example for this lab. So we don't have 12, we don't have 13. These are just samples they give you. 99, since they give you a 10 here, I'm going to leave the 10 there. I'm going to change the 99 to a 20. And I didn't really call out what we're going to use these VLANs for in the lab. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call it guest just because that might apply to some folks. Okay, so VLAN 20 is going to have the segment name guest. It's going to have an interface. If you need to add routing, you can. So if we click add routing, you can turn on LAN routing. I'm going to leave this unchecked just because I'm demoing just WAN side right now. Now for VLAN 10, I'll just call this port users in all caps. All right, and it's going to be attached to an interface. So now that's all the wizard or the workflow needs. Okay, so if I scroll up and I show topology now and I zoom in, you can see based on the input that I provided, you can see it drew a nice little picture, right? We have biz internet, MPLS, through the edge device, we're going to route VPN 10 and 20. So let's go ahead and hit next. Actually, I'm going to hide the topology. I'm going to hit next. I'm not going to do anything with remote access. I'm just going to hit next here. Now it spits out a summary page of basically everything that we just discussed. And that's your chance to determine if you've got something incorrect, you would want to go back and fix that. I'm just going to go ahead and say create configuration group. And notice what it's doing in the top right. It's creating all the various profiles for us. So again, very simple way to do this. So it's asking me now, it's saying, hey, by the way, there's no devices affiliated with this configuration group. Do you want to associate devices? I'm going to do this later because I just want to point out a few things. And the topology that I'm working with actually needs a couple settings in order to for it to successfully complete. So let's walk through those now. So if we come back to configuration groups, We see single router branch has now been added, right? That's the one we just created. And we can see all the profiles, excuse me. It's created a system profile. It's created the transport management profile. This one was already here. It's now got a service policy. And CLI, this is actually one of the ones we're going to want to add. So while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and say create profile. And I'm just going to call it, hold on, single router branch is what we said, right? Single router branch CLI. I'm going to create that. And it's asking me, what do you want your CLI script to contain? All I want to do here, and this is just for my sake, if I need to reboot this router, I want to give it the command platform console serial because I'm using 8KVs, and if I don't put that after they're controller managed, I won't be able to see them or do anything with the CLI, which is fairly annoying. So I'm just going to make sure that that command is in there. All right, now there's a few other things. So I'm just checking my notes here. So under transport and management profile, we're going to go in, we're going to edit this. So I'm going to edit now. It's important for my topology, since I'm using a domain controller as the certificate authority as well as the DNS server. I need to tell my transport VPN what the DNS server is. Because again, I'm not using a DHCP assigned internet address. I'm using static. So next to VPN 0, I'm going to hit the pencil and I'm going to edit this. And you can see there's a tab for DNS. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my DNS server. So I'm going to make it global because this isn't going to change. And I'm just going to put that virtual machine that's running the DNS service as well as the certificate authority. That's the IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so that's taken care of. Now, the other thing that we need to be concerned about is the MPLS interface. We're trying to peer BGP with Windstream, the service provider. And if we go in here and we say edit, under tunnel, and this goes for any tunnel, by the way, we're concerned with MPLS because that's where I want to run a protocol. But for any of the tunnel interfaces, if you come over to tunnel and you scroll down, under allow service, okay, you notice that all is unselected and BGP is also off. It's very important that if you're trying to peer BGP with a service provider, you're going to want to make sure that the BGP service is allowed on your tunnel. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle that to the on position. I'm going to save that. Now there's one more piece to this. Again, I said that my topology needs to be able to resolve DNS names. So if we go back and we go to the system profile and we edit this within global, I'm going to hit the pencil here. What I'm looking for is domain lookup. So when you configure routers with the CLI, you go in the config T, you do IP domain -lookup, and that allows the router to do DNS lookups to resolve IP addresses. That's what this setting is. I want that to be enabled, so I'm going to go ahead and globally set that to on. It gives me a warning. This will affect DNS functionality. Yes, I know. I need it to work, so I'm enabling it. So I'm going to save that. And for me, with this topology that we're working on, that's the only tweaks I need to make to essentially make this topology work the way that I want it to. Now, if I come back, the only thing we need to do at this point is if we go to configuration groups, what we need to do is we need to associate our router or routers to this configuration group. So I'm going to say add, and it brings up the available routers within my topology. Now we're only playing with San Jose, so I'm going to select San Jose, and I'm going to hit save. So now it's attached, okay? So if we go back, we can see it's now associated, but we haven't deployed anything, right? Saying out of sync, yeah, we know because we haven't deployed it. So let's go ahead and deploy it. We check it off, we hit next. Now, this is very similar to the templates, where once it's in the deployment phase, we need to tell it what the information is that we're going to attach to those variables that we had associated within the configuration group, which the workflow made profiles for us, right? So it already knows, based on my basic config, it knows what the system IP, the name, and the site ID is. Those aren't going to change. They're going to stay just like the way they are. This is the meat and potatoes of it. So for VPN 0, okay, this is the default gateway. So again, you'll recall that my internet is the same hop for all the routers. So it's this IP address here. For the BGP autonomous system number, all of the branch sites, I just made the executive decision that they're all going to run autonomous system number 65,000. This again will depend on your topology, but for my sake, I'm just making all the branch sites 65,000. Now it's asking me, what's your BGP neighbor address? So if we go back to the MPLS router, just to show you, and I show IP interface brief, it should be basically interface 1 goes to site 1, 2 goes to site 2, 3 goes to site 3, 4 goes to site 4. So San Jose is site 3. So my neighbor address should be this highlighted IP, 192.168.13.1. So I'm going to go ahead and just paste that in there. The remote autonomous system number, again, I had said in the beginning, is 7029. It's simulating Windstream. Now, here's the network address and mask for the prefix that we're going to advertise. I'm just going to use the IP that's affiliated with the site ID. So just the very first IP address in the San Jose range. And I'm just going to make that a /32. Okay. This is obviously going to change, right? And by the way, with this topology, I'm actually, as the service, playing the role of the service provider. If I do a show run section BGP, I'm actually doing the advertisements on the service provider side for all 4 locations. Okay. This is the /30 transport that the service provider is using to talk to the branch site. So I'm doing those advertisements, again, trying to keep this simple. So I don't need to put that /30 on my side because the service provider is taking care of it for me. Now for Biz Internet, it says, what's the interface for the Biz Internet? So in our particular case, it is Gigabit Ethernet 2. Says, what's the IP address? I'm just using 11.103. Again, if we go back to the topology, all the internet addresses should be within the same /24. So I'm using 103 because this is site 3, just easy to remember. And the subnet there is a /24, so we select that off the list. For the MPLS is actually Gigabit Ethernet 1. All right, so we select 1. Its IP address, if we go back to the topology, this is a big /16, but what I'm doing is for the sites, I'm just doing 13, or I'm doing 192.168.11 dot for site 1. It's 11, right? Let me double check. Yes, 11, 12, 13, and 14 are the various sites. So if we come back to the manager, it should be 13.2 for San Jose, and that is a /30. All right. And then the last piece is the service side. So this is for the IP address schema of VPN 10 and 20. So if we go back to the topology, this Gig 4 interface, it's a trunk that's going downstream to a Catalyst 9000 series virtual switch. So the idea will be that these should be sub interfaces. So Gig 4.10 would be significant of VLAN 10, and Gig 4.20 would be significant of or indicative of VLAN 20 or VPN 20. So let's go ahead and tell it that Gigabit Ethernet 4.10 is for VPN 10. that should correspond to 10.3.10.1, and we'll make that a /24. For VLAN, or excuse me, VPN 20, it's going to be gigabit Ethernet 4.20. It's going to be 10.3.20.1, and that is likewise going to be a /24. So we hit next, and it'll spit out a summary page like all of these workflows have been doing. So I know they're correct. I'm going to go ahead and hit deploy. And we can go ahead and view the deployment status if we click the link. If I go back to the router and I kind of drag the router over, we should, with any luck, see some action start to happen here momentarily. We can see the status has changed to be in progress in the background here. We can see a whole bunch of console messages coming across the router itself, which should be a good thing. We even see a BGP neighbor statement come up, so that's also a good thing. We see that it has in fact been successful, so let me blow this up. And let's do some verification here. So let's do a show IP interface brief. And as you recall, when I showed the IP interface brief a few minutes ago, it was essentially nothing, right? It was just the raw interface for the internet transport, and that was it, right? But as the router got configured, we now see that it has an MPLS address on gig 1. It retained the address on gig 2. It has two sub-interfaces hanging off gig 4, respectively VPN 10 and VPN 20. So this looks very promising. If we do a show VRF, there's 10 and 20. It went ahead and created the macro segmentation that we want, VPN 10 and 20, associated with the VRFs. If we show run section BGP, it built autonomous system number 65,000. We can see the peer should be the Windstream router hanging or belonging to AS7029. It's got our network statement, which was that /32, and we went ahead and we activated it. So this looks awesome. If we show IP route for the global routing table, we've got the static default route that we had told about, which is good, right? And then we've also got some BGP prefixes, because remember, the MPLS service provider router had those network statements in there. So we are in fact learning those networks via BGP. So this is all looking perfect. Now, if we show IP route for VRF 10, we see that it put the subnet 10.3.10.0/24 in its own VRF, which is exactly what we expected to do. We've actually already learned an OMP route from Research Triangle Park because it is advertising 10.4.10. So that is awesome. If we do the same thing for VRF 20, we see very similar output, except it's 10.3.20 as opposed to 10.3.10. And look at that, we're even learning a route from RTP on that VPN as well. And I guess last but not least, what we should probably look at is connectivity. So if we ping VRF 10 and we ping 10.4.10.1, which is RTP, we see that we have connectivity. If we trace VRF 10 to 10.4.10.1 and we say numeric, look at that. We're actually even trace routing. We can see that we're routing the MPLS connectivity or underlay transport to reach RTP. So that is the process of doing a configuration group within SD-WAN Manager. You can see it's very simple. We just turned up a branch office in a matter of minutes, and we've proven that it has the macro segmentation, the connectivity, all as well. So I hope that has been informative. I hope you got something out of that video, and I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Take care.